Hey, I'm Nick DiMatteo, and welcome to Season 8, Episode 9 of Music is Not a Genre. We have another guest this week, so you know it's something special. Let's do those hand gestures together. MxG. Oh, I may have to adopt Shaka's way of doing it. I like that a lot better. And by the way, yes, that's right. This is interview number 45, and my guest is Shaka Mitchell. But before we get there, thank you as always for watching and listening. Listeners, go to youtube.com/@musicisnotagenre. You get a video for every episode of this podcast. Watchers, go to nickdimatteo.com/musicisnotagenre if you would rather not see our wonderful faces and just listen. And everyone, go to patreon.com/musicisnotagenre to support this podcast, my band Rec, and everything I do. And speaking of Rec, our new single, Me Happy, is out streaming everywhere. You can go to nickdimatteo.com/music to check that out. And very soon on its heels will be a remix from our album Kite to Camden coming before the end of the year. And finally, I have a song coaching business. If you're out there and you've always wanted to write a song and just didn't know where to start, you can go to nickdimatteo.com/thesongcoach, and I can help you out with that. And as always, like, share, subscribe, rate, review, lather, rinse, repeat, and all the things that all of us independent creators love you for doing. And so let's get to it again. This is interview number 45, and my guest today is Shaka Mitchell. Shaka is a father, education advocate, and creator of the Come Together music project based in Nashville, Tennessee. He's a previous TEDx speaker and appears in the upcoming documentary Louder Than Guns, project by Ketch Secor of Old Crow Medicine Show. And we're going to talk about a bunch of those things. And one more note, which I'm going to include because I really love this. Shaka was not named after R&B titan Chaka Khan, but rather named after Zulu warrior king Shaka Zulu. And we're probably going to talk about that later too. Shaka, how are you today?
I'm great, Nick. Thanks for having me on, man.
Absolutely. I am so excited to have you today. You're something I've been looking forward to actually for a couple of weeks. So I like to start this way with every guest because you never know where it's going to go. And it's one of my favorite ways to have a conversation. And that is, tell everyone your story, where you're from, your origins, what you do. You can interpret it however you want and go back as far as you want.
Yeah, well, I'll try to keep it brief then, because that's probably the least exciting part of this podcast. So, but again, thanks for having me on. Really happy to get to share with your audience a little bit. I love meeting musicians and talking to artists, and so it's just great to hang for a little bit. Like I said, I'll try to keep it brief. I was born and raised on Long Island, New York, Nassau County, which means that despite all logic and reason, I still root for the New York Mets. And every summer I celebrate Bobby Bonilla Day, where we just set money on fire or flush it down the toilet, whichever metaphor works better for you. That's what we do. But I've still got some family in the New York area, and then moved to Georgia when I was in high school. So that was, on the one hand, a tremendous culture shock. On the other hand, I was really thankful for the experiences of both living in New York and living outside Atlanta. Got some really interesting perspective, I think. Now, as you mentioned, I'm in Music City in Nashville, Tennessee, after having spent some time in grad school in New York and some time working in DC. Professionally, I'm a lawyer by training. So yeah, nothing within the arts, quite far from it, but have always just loved music. So we'll get to talking some more about that. And yeah, we could talk about lots of things, but I'm one of 4 kids. My siblings are around the country doing different interesting things, and I've got 3 kids of my own, 3 daughters who are school age, and so my wife and I are just trying to figure out how to make that work and how to run the family taxi service, which is what it now feels like, as there are activities happening all the time, everywhere.
Oh, yeah. I have 3 kids as well, and they're all older, but I remember those days of just constant driving around from one thing to another.
Yeah, so. Tons of activities, but my eldest she just got her learner's permit actually this week. So,
Ooh,
we're getting there where we can see it on the horizon,
yeah.
but we're not there yet. So there's just a lot of activities, and their social calendars are way more full than mine are. I kind of look at my calendar and think I would just like some time to read a book or something in silence and peace. And I'm looking at their calendar, and it's just things happening all the time. Go, go, go. But it's a joy. I mean, I do love it. So it keeps us on our toes.
It is pretty great. Yeah. So your oldest is about the same age as my youngest, actually.
Okay.
So yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting transition those first few years when they start to hit that age, and all of a sudden you blink your eyes and they're gone from the house. It's crazy. Yeah,
Sure,
it's
sure. Yeah,
yeah.
I can see it already. What do they say? The days are long, but the years are short. And I think
Oh,
that absolutely makes sense when you're thinking about how it feels. Because every day, sometimes, you have those days that can feel like battles a little bit, where you're just battling through life and parenting and
hmm
adolescence and all that. And then
hmm
you blink and you kind of go, wait, where did that whole year go? And so I see that. I see that we're going to miss it here sooner than later. So trying to enjoy it while we can.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing be aware of, because you're right. You're still going to have frustrations and things where you're like, I didn't really need to go through that, or oh, I handled that great. I didn't handle that so well, and
Yep.
it's just part of the flow of all of it. But if even a part of your brain is aware that it's going to change quicker than you think, then you're getting everything you can out of it, and
Yeah,
so are your kids.
that's right. Yeah. And maybe we'll have a little bit more grace for our parents as well, you know?
Ah, boy, you from your mouth to my kids' ears, because my oldest is definitely asserting her independence, and I'm like, okay, that's her age. She's 25, so she needs to do that's fine, and she's having a great life, which is the important thing. She's hopefully we'll get to the place where there's a little bit more grace for the parents, but
One day, one
yeah,
day.
one day.
One
So
day she'll realize how much you said that, maybe dad was at least semi right. You might not get 100% credit, but partially right.
no, I don't need 100. Yeah, even 50 or
Yeah.
20, I'll
Yeah.
take. So yeah, that's interesting. You're from Nassau County, and I live in Astoria, Queens, so I'm not that far from there. I've been out
Yeah.
to Nassau quite often.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom is from Queens, and um, yeah, we often had family kind of in the area, and I spent a lot of time. You try to explain to folks who are not really that familiar with New York. Everybody thinks New York, and they think like Lower Manhattan,
So true. Yeah.
right? And
Or
I would,
Times Square or
yeah,
something
folks would
like
say,
that.
"Well,
Yeah.
how close were you to Times Square?" And I go, "Well, I can tell you the mileage, but that doesn't really tell you much."
No, it
I
doesn't.
think I measured it once. I think, yeah, mileage wise, I think we're probably, I don't know, it's like 10 miles. It's not very far,
Right.
um, or an hour easy,
Yes.
and
Yes.
worlds away culturally. So,
Yeah, it's incredibly different. And I'm actually a transplant. I've been here a long time, but it's kind of ironic that you are in Nashville and you're rooting for the Mets.
yeah.
And I was born and raised in the Philadelphia area. So,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I'm always rooting for the Phillies. But
Okay.
we've gone to Citi Field quite often to see the Phillies play the Mets. So it's.
Yeah, I've never been to City Field. I mean, I remember I was there back in the days of Shea Stadium,
Oh,
and
yeah.
when the amazing Mets, 1986, when they won the World Series, and um, yeah, that team is still
Yeah.
the iconic team to me. Not to get too political, but I don't know if you saw this week
Mhm.
um, that Darryl Strawberry was pardoned by the president.
Oh,
I,
really?
I guess for some charges that he had, he wasn't even serving, so I don't exactly know.
Yeah, I
It
guess.
doesn't have
Yeah.
much practical import. And I can
No.
say that like as a lawyer, but nevertheless, I was like,
hmm
well, okay. I mean, I'm a Strawberry fan, so whatever.
Sure. Why not? I mean, it
Why
might
not?
be
He went 40
symbolic
for,
at this point, but
he went
it's
40-40 one year. That was amazing. That was,
right.
mind blowing at the time.
I remember that year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you move to Georgia for school?
We moved when I was about to start high school. And
Oh, okay.
so just a product of some family things going on, and both my parents worked for the post office, and so you could do that. You could sort of transfer. There's a post office Somerset anywhere, right? And
Oh, yeah.
um, and so I don't know if that's still the case that transfers are that easy, but we could do that. Especially back then, the cost of living was so much better in the
Hmm.
South, that we moved from Nassau County, from Hempstead, and we moved to Powder Springs, Georgia, which is sort of outside. It's like northwest of Atlanta. It's kind of Marietta, that
Mm.
area.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, I mean, it was like it's cul-de-sacs. It's subdivisions with cul-de-sacs, and that was a very different environment than where we lived prior to that. So just the confluence of some life things happening, family things happening, but got to experience those formative high school years in the South before going off to school.
Yeah, I can see what you mean about having such different experiences in the two different places too. That has to be very, instructive.
It was definitely instructive. I mean, that is, I think if you ask my sister, um, she would say that instructive is a euphemism for terrible. She did not really enjoy the experience a whole lot, at least not at first. And I
She
will say,
older or younger?
she is the same age.
Oh,
She's the same age, and
oh,
we're the same age, and
got it.
she just did not really enjoy that. It took her a while, much longer, I think, to kind of get on board with the new reality. And
Mm.
I'll say, when we first moved, this is, I'll date myself here. I've already dated myself by talking about the '86 Mets, but um, this is the mid '90s, early to mid '90s, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So this, which is to say, pre-internet, and so
Oh, yes.
it felt a little bit like we were from the future going from New York to Georgia back then.
Wow.
I mean, I remember very specifically that there was music that we were listening to, um, that we wouldn't start listening to in Georgia for another year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah.
That much of a lag. That's
It
incredible.
was a tremendous lag. And I
Huh.
think things were much more regionalized back then.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. So maybe it wasn't even the lag, right? Maybe probably if you were in the know, if you were in the industry, probably people knew. But something that was felt regional. I'll give you an example.
Yes.
I think the first summer after moving, I went back to New York, and while I was up there, one of the songs that was on the radio was by this group, then called the Refugees. They would change their name to the Fugees,
Yeah.
right? But the
Yeah.
Refugees were out. I remember I got a tape, and at the time, it was like it was one of those. It was almost like an EP.
Yes.
So it was just a few songs. I think it was Mona Lisa, and there were a couple of remixes of it. And I got that tape. We wouldn't start listening to the Fugees until for another 2 years in Georgia, and I think probably because it was thought of as like a New York, New Jersey kind of band. And then all of a sudden the score comes out, they rebrand a little bit, and it's a big deal everywhere. But likewise in Georgia, song of the summer was, when we moved down there, was "Whoop There It Is,"
Oh,
and
yeah.
which would eventually get very big,
Yes.
but it was on fire in Atlanta when we first moved down there. And I think that
Oh,
probably
wow.
took a while to catch on. People were probably like, what are these guys so hyped about? It's not even a word.
See, now I love this because I mean I'm older than you, and I remember all those years, and I will say I don't think I've heard that original Refugees EP, so I might have to look that up.
Yeah, check it
But
out.
I didn't experience, like, I lived at the time in the Philadelphia area in New Jersey, and then a few years later moved here to New York City. So regionally, there was no real difference for me. Things that were in New York were trickling down to Philly, and and vice versa. So I didn't experience that sort of culture shock of. I was aware of the regional stuff, especially for whatever reason in hip hop. When you're talking about East Coast, West Coast, Southern hip hop,
Yep.
there's kind of the New Orleans, the Louisiana scene and all stuff like that. And that's because I read up on it, and Rolling Stone or other publications, and kind of immersed myself in trying to figure out what else was out there that wasn't being played here. But maybe that's the reason why it didn't even dawn on me at the time that these were so kind of, like you said,
Mm.
regional, to the point of if they ever broke, they would break like months and months later, nationally.
Right.
That never dawned on me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think an example that in some ways kind of still holds true. I don't know how familiar you are with go-go music out of DC,
Oh, yes. Yes.
but that's a very DC centric genre, right?
Right.
And folks in DC know go-go, and you can artists from DC, you can hear it sometimes incorporated into other types of music that they're doing, whatever. But I'm pretty sure. I mean, you've never really had go-go music go like national, and it's not for lack of talent. It just feels like it's one of those regional things that, for some reason, stays close to home. The other thing that was really remarkable was the difference in fashion, which of course is a big deal for high school kids. They're just trying to figure out what to wear and how to fit in, all this stuff. Mind you, my sister and I had attended Catholic school. So it was easy for us because we knew what we were wearing every day. We were wearing a uniform. It was like with the plaid, my sister wore a plaid jumper and, with the Peter Pan collar. And I had the uniform slacks and a dress shirt and all that. Okay, well, then we start going to a public school, big public high school in Georgia, and we could wear whatever we wanted, which on the one hand was freeing, but we were from this other planet called New York. And so, no, I don't think anyone else in the high school, other than my sister and I, wore jeans that were not blue. Because colored jeans, well, you remember this was a big deal in around that
Yes.
era.
Yes.
There
Yes.
brands like Cross Colors and things like that. And yeah, I mean, I had green jeans and purple jeans and whatever. And I think that was like forging new territory. We might as well have stepped off Mars.
God, that is just incredible. Yeah. And we take all that for granted now because it's been a couple of decades at least, that
Yeah.
music has been everywhere, well, pretty much immediately.
Yeah.
And I still think there are, like you said, there are still regional scenes, and you can hear a different flavor of different kinds of music even to this day, because that's always going to be the case. Is where you live, is the experience. But I think, most people, which could be good or bad, just say, well, that's a great song, and that's all they care about. And there's a lot less discussion about the kind of homegrown scenes out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Well, and you think about, again, what something like the internet has done to how quickly things spread. I mean,
Yeah.
did my kids and me, let's be honest, why did we watch K-pop Demon Hunters? We wouldn't have known what K-pop was. You couldn't know what K-pop was in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
Unless you knew someone who had been to Korea.
Yes.
You just could not know about this. Now,
Yes.
some new K-pop album drops and instantly it can hit your feed, whatever. And, a high schooler in Nebraska now knows, and you can see what they're wearing. You can see all this stuff, right? So I think it's just much more global in a way. Obviously there's going to be country differences and cultural differences, but not nearly what it was then. And who knows what our grandparents would have said.
Oh, yeah. Forget. I mean, even far more isolation at the time.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm doing a lot of what I do for this show is research on, for the writing, and some of those episodes have to do with history. And the history can go as far back as you want, but usually it's late 1800s to early 1900s. And then when I start getting into the discussion of the recorded music era in 40s and 50s and 60s and all of that, to really dig into how isolated everybody was at the time, even compared to the mid late 60s and 70s, when things were much more back and forth with the flow of various kinds of music. It's almost impossible to imagine how that would have felt.
Yeah. And I can't even imagine the idea that to bring music, say, from the States to Europe or to other parts of the country,
Yes.
you had to think about how to delicately and carefully pack your vinyl and carry it with you, right?
Yes.
I mean, these are real problems. These are real world problems. Um,
Yes.
I mean, that's just a
Uh,
wild problem to think about, even just transporting the the music. Once you could do that, which of course that in and of itself was a modern innovation in the 20th century, but then you still had to figure out how to do it. Can you imagine just lugging crates onto a ship so that you could
oh,
go transit Atlantic just to share, hey, I think you guys are really going to enjoy this. It's called blues.
right.
Here's a
Totally.
here's a 200-pound crate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And that's the company's thinking, is it even worth it to do that? And then for some reason it is, and they do it. And a lot of times that seemed to happen because some single person, a musician or not, even would go and visit the States and hear a song and buy the record and then
Yeah.
take the record
Yeah.
back, give it to a DJ or something, and then all of a sudden everybody wants it.
Yep.
Some random
Yep.
things like that.
No,
Yeah.
it's very cool. And yeah, I think it speaks a little bit to just how universal music can be.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Because I feel like those kinds of connections, however long they took then and however quickly they are now, help with the communication across cultural barriers and things like that. And that sounds like something that you're very into actually with what you do. So,
Yeah, yeah, I'm very very into it, sort of just like as a passion pursuit. But I also think it's a really interesting way to think about how ideas get shared around the world. Ideas and with those ideas sometimes come values. And yeah, when you introduce someone to the music of your home, you, that's a type of commerce in a way. It's almost like a humanitarian commerce, right? So forget about the selling of the music. You're sort of introducing them to, let me tell you about this world a little bit, and here's how it sounds in my world and to the people that are in my community.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that the conversations that we're having and that I've had with other guests and on other people's shows are some of my most favorite moments because of the types of discovery and connections that we're finding. I end every episode with my objectives are music, conversation, and connection. That's what I say at the end of every episode. It's I get some of that from my regular episodes where it's just me because I get feedback, but this is real conversation that we're having. And sure, we're talking about things other than music, but we're gonna, we're getting to the point, and we've already touched on it, but we're getting to the point where we're really going to get into the music aspect of all of this. And I'll say one more thing, which is the title of my show, Music is Not a Genre, doesn't just mean that music of one genre is actually very much more crossing over with other genres, and you can't really confine music to one single sound. It's that music as an entity cannot and should not be separated from the world at
Hmm.
large. It itself is not a genre of creation or existence that is apart from our experience of the world. And so I'm constantly bringing in social and political and philosophical ideas for that reason.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, to your point, music has been a part of every known civilization, right,
Ha,
throughout humanity. And
yes, yes,
I think I know we'll talk some more about this, that there's a
for sure.
bonding element, but you're right. I mean, it is part and parcel, I think, of the human experience. I've got to think that the the first people, when they were whatever hunting and gathering, were probably humming a tune, right?
Ah,
Who knows where that
yes.
came from? Did it come from nature? Whatever, I don't know, but that's just what we do.
Wow, I love that. And yeah, we're absolutely going to get into that. We've got a few more minutes before the first half of the show, but I want to say to everybody that one of the main reasons I'm excited about this discussion is your project, Come Together Music Project. And that's, I think, we're going to kick off the second half talking about that and wherever that leads us. But before we get there, I have to mention you meant a couple of things. First of all, you mentioned go-go music, and I had barely heard of it. And then I was on a film set in 2019, and one of the actors I think he grew up in DC,
Hmm.
and he knew I was a musician, and he started talking to me about go-go music and got so excited
Hmm.
and said the same thing you said, which is nobody really knows what it is unless you're from DC. And I was like, yeah, to be honest, I had heard of it, but I couldn't really quite describe the sound even now because I haven't listened to enough of it. But that was 6 years ago, and here we are in 2025, and we're still talking about how isolated that particular genre is, you know?
Yeah, I spoke with somebody just recently, um, a woman who used to live in the DC area. She used to do some music production, and now she's actually in Costa Rica. And she was talking about this, and it's probably why it's a little top of mind. She just mentioned how hard it was as someone who was trying to book go-go musicians
Ooh.
because again, outside the area, it's just not a music that people are really familiar with, and so it's hard to sell tickets. But really talented musicians, and but I've never heard it anywhere else.
It makes you wonder if after all these decades that there's going to be that one artist that finally
Right,
breaks it in
it kind of
Nashville, you
breaks
know?
through. Yeah,
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 I
that'd be
guess we'll
cool.
see. But one more question before we break, and that is, what got you to Nashville?
Yeah, I came to Nashville to go to college.
Oh, there
So
you go.
so when I came, after graduating high school, and I came to Belmont University, which is a small school in
Okay.
Nashville. Belmont certainly then was primarily known as a music school. Like 40% of the majors when I was there were
Mm,
music related,
mm.
either music performance, music business. Music business was for all the kids who had had dreams of being in the industry, but their parents said, "You better get a business degree, not a fine arts degree."
Yep, yep.
They're like, "You better study
That-
something on
right,
the
right.
off chance that you don't get a Billboard, top 50
Off
song."
chance. Yeah,
Yeah, on the off
yeah,
chance.
yeah.
But I just loved my time there, and I was not studying
Mm,
music. I was like one of the few, it felt like, who wasn't, but
mm.
really just loved being around all that creativity. And one of the things that I found, and this is non-scientific, but whatever, that's what podcasts are for.
Yep.
I Nashville has so many now small businesses and folks who are doing other creative things, and I really think a big part of that is because there are so many folks who come to Nashville with dreams of being in the music industry. But
Mhm.
as you know, that's a tough business. Um, I think that creativity is going to find an outlet.
Ah,
And so we get some really interesting things. I mean, it was years before we had a Starbucks in Nashville
oh, wow.
because people had all these other little independent coffee shops
The
because they
local,
were just
yeah.
doing their other local things. And I'm not a Starbucks hater or whatever, but it's just to sort of say, um, in my side of town, we just got the first Starbucks. I live in Nashville. I'm in Nashville proper.
Mm, okay.
Um, I live in East Nashville, but I mean, it takes me about 5 minutes, and I can see downtown. I mean, it's right there.
Wow.
We got our first Starbucks, I think, 2 years ago,
Oh my God.
because there's
Wow.
just so much creative energy doing other things and independent
Yeah.
things. And
You
so I
had
think,
enough already. Yeah.
yeah. So in some ways, like, I feel for the folks who are really talented and maybe aren't getting to express themselves in that way and do it and make a living. On the other
Mhm.
hand, I think that our community kind of benefits from it because they're doing really interesting things, and they're still finding creative outlets.
We see that here in New York too. We absolutely
Sure.
do. And it's
Yeah.
such a, like, any big market, Nashville is one of the big three or four, really. The competition's so, steep that you end up, right. You have to find other ways, to express yourself.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you because last year I had a guest on the show from Nashville as well. He's professor and author,
Okay.
music books, predominantly country, but he knows all of music history. I think that's what he teaches. I don't remember the college, but his name is Don Cusick.
Oh, uh, yeah. Yeah. Don Cusick, I think, is at Belmont.
He is. Wow. Okay. I thought that sounded familiar.
I'm pretty sure that's, Yeah, I'm pretty sure
You might
that's
be
right.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
'Cause he
and
said it was a big music school.
yeah. Professor of industry history and music business at
That's the
Curb,
one.
which is
Yeah.
yeah. He's I think he's been at Belmont for a long time. He was there when I was there. Um,
He said
yeah,
he
and
was there quite a while. Yeah.
yeah. And again, I mean, we've had some really tremendous artists that have come out of Belmont, but um, even thinking back to my roommates, some of my roommates who were very talented musicians and then have stayed in the industry, but maybe not as performers. You end up
Hmm.
sometimes folks who have a performance background and have a background in musicality, they can be great sort of support team members, right, for other artists because they think like, hey, we got to
Absolutely.
get this part right. We got to make sure the experience is just so. So I've got roommates who have been on tour with other major artists for a while or run their own studios. And again, it was so much fun to be around all that talent and not have the pressure of having to write a hit song. So
Yeah. Well, and I actually want to ask you a little bit about that in the second half of how you got so involved in music, being a lawyer and having a different background and everything. And we are going to get to that right after our mid episode break in just about a minute. So stick around and we'll be right back with Shaka Mitchell. Hey, thanks for checking out this episode of Music is Not a Genre. If you'd like to learn more about this podcast, if you'd like to learn more about the music I do with my band Rec or any other projects or anything else about me, go to nickdematteo.com. That's Nick, DEMATTEO.com. And everything is there. There's even a link to a merch store where you can get t-shirts and mugs and hats and totes and notebooks and so many other things. I'm always adding new products there. Great way to support the podcast. And finally, go to patreon.com/music is not a genre if you'd really like to show your support. My fans and lovely family there get exclusives and other perks and early releases, and they get to suggest topics for future podcasts as well. Thanks for listening to the mid-roll. Now back to the show. All right, we are back with Shaka Mitchell, and I want to get into the Come Together Music Project, but before we get there, I have one other question, which is, you say you're a lawyer and an education advocate. So tell me about a little bit about that, but then also what got you so into music, not having that musical background?
yeah, how do you make that pivot, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, professionally, I've spent my career working in the education space and specifically working to change laws, mostly at the state level, that afford parents greater flexibility of choice with where they educate their kids. I work for a national nonprofit advocacy organization, and that's what we do. Most state law is what governs the education space. So you hear a lot of noise often because everything now is so nationalized. You hear a lot of noise about the U.S. Department of Education,
Yeah.
but really most decisions are made at the local and state level. And so that's kind of where I spend a lot of my time. And sometimes it's helping lawmakers write legislation, whether it's for a new tax credit scholarship program or to help open public charter schools or make even district enrollment across lines easier. That's kind of how I spent my career. In terms of how you get from that to what we're going to talk about, which is the Come Together Music Project, the way I describe it is that in my first 20 years, 25 years or so, I spent a lot of time thinking about how we can better prepare our children for the world that they're going to enter. And that is that you're a parent, I'm a parent. That's something that all parents are doing. How do we make sure that you're ready to enter the world? Super important, obviously. The past few years, I think, unfortunately, you've seen such a decrease in like civil discourse. Some of the fibers and the fabric of our communities have just frayed. And so, I mean, obviously there's political violence. There are people in what were otherwise really, really sleepy, like county town hall meetings or school board meetings, just shouting at each other and yelling and Um,
Ugh,
just some things are really nasty and ugly.
yeah.
So I've started to think less about, or maybe alongside, I shouldn't say less, while I think about still how do we prepare our kids to enter the world, I really started to think, how do we make sure that this world is one that we want our kids to enter?
Ooh, wow.
That is some of what led me to the Come Together Music Project.
Oh, okay. Oh, I wanna untangle that for sure. But a question about your because I've always been fascinated with this, and one of the other professions I have is I edit other people's podcasts, and one of those podcasts is called No Silly Questions, and it's run by two educators. So I am listening, every 2 weeks to intense discussions on education, and one of them works for a charter school and one doesn't, and they talk about that and everything. But the thing that's always, concerned me and I have questions about is the balance between having some federal standards for education, but acknowledging that regionally there are different needs. How do you like see that whole thing?
Yeah, this is a an important question, and it's a very tough question in the United States of America, given our federal system. Meaning,
Yes.
given the fact that we've got what we used to refer to as the laboratory of the states,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
if you
Experiment.
if you think about if you think about this, and we're in this a season of turmoil where the national government, I would say, has an outsized influence as compared to say 50 years ago or 100 years ago, 150 years ago.
Mm.
But in most areas, actually, we don't really have national standards. There's a couple places where we have national standards. One of those would be something like aviation, right?
Okay. Gotcha.
Aviation's a place where we have national standards, and you can kind of understand why, because in it doesn't take too long for an airplane to get from one state to another state.
Yeah. Right.
But when you think about something like even a driver's license, well, every state has a different standard, right? I
Yes.
just my eldest is 15. We were talking about this a little bit
Yep.
before we started recording. She just got her learner's permit. There were questions on that I assure you I did not have to learn, right? And part of that is just the difference in states.
Yeah.
And so when I think about, what might it look like to have national standards, I think about, well, it's really hard to do that in the U.S. just given our system of government. That being said, as a parent, what I do think is important is having as much information as you need to make a good decision. And so
Mm.
I would say, regardless of what state you're in, I would say regardless of whether or not you have children in a public school, a private school, a charter, you're homeschooling, whatever, I do think that data is important because it tells you something. So it
Yes.
doesn't tell you everything,
Yep.
but I think it tells you something. We want to know, how is my student doing in this subject? How are they developing in this area?
Hmm.
And if we can have some comparative data, I think that's really helpful.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, you need something empirical to know what the next steps are and what changes to make and what's working, what
Yeah.
isn't, and all of
Yeah.
that.
In,
Yeah.
in some ways, I think it would be what you'd hope for is that uh, schools themselves would kind of like self-police,
Right.
right? So
Right.
if you think about, for instance, um, lots of, even actually in my profession, in the legal profession or in the medical profession,
Hmm.
there are more self-imposed duties and standards than actual regulations,
Mm.
right? I mean, the Hippocratic Oath is not a law.
Oh, that's true.
It's a
Yeah.
standard that that medical professionals say, hey, we actually think that this is really good for our patients, and so we're going to impose that on ourselves.
Right.
And so if you want to join our profession, it's almost like a guild. If you want to join our profession,
Oh, yeah.
here's something you're going to sign on to,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we're going to do that. You almost wish that schools would do a similar thing and kind of
Oh,
self-police a little bit. I think it would take some of the, like, some people just have a knee-jerk reaction and they say, I don't want this regulated, and I think it would take the sting out of that.
Wow. Yeah. I love that. And I guess that's something you're trying to advocate for, or
Well, we don't work a ton on standards, although in legislation that we work on, we do say that data is important. So we do advocate a lot for data transparency, and we do advocate for some type of like nationally norm reference test. Um,
yeah.
we
Okay.
don't, we think it can be, there are actually a lot of these. So
Yeah.
I don't know what test you took growing up. When I was in New York, I took the Iowa test. When you moved down to Georgia, it was a different test.
Oh
We
yeah. I
don't,
think I took the Iowa. Yeah.
yeah, we don't really care what the test is. There's a lot of them, but again, the purpose for me is give teachers some data that they can act upon, but also give parents some data that they can use to make better decisions.
Yeah. I mean, I can talk all day about this because just the idea of data mattering really matters to me.
Yeah.
But so here you are, working hard on, on behalf of issues like this and saying that you want to create or contribute to a world that you want your kids to live in. How does that tie to music and to the Come Together Music Project?
Yeah. So I'll give you a little bit of the origin story, and um, and hopefully you see how I think these things are linked. So when COVID hit, personally, like many people, whereas of course there was the loss of life that many people dealt with, whether it was family members or folks just in our communities. You're seeing lots of different other restrictions, come into play. Just that loss of being in proximity, I really felt that, right? And so, along with some friends here in Nashville, we started getting together, meeting, just a couple guys, meeting once a month, and we would hang out in a friend's driveway, because again, these are the days of like massive social distancing. Nobody knew what's healthy or not, right, or harmful. Right. So we'd sit out there in my buddy's driveway. Beforehand, we would send around a list of a couple song categories, and then each one of us would bring songs that matched the category, and then we'd listen to them, and we just listen. We'd talk. So it's part like listening party. It's part storytelling.
Wow.
And so that was a great way to have some connectivity again and kind of regain some of that during this time that was just so depressing on any number of measures.
Right.
So we're doing that. At the same time, I mean, as you know, and as you remember, politically, things are just getting way more polarized. I mean, that's the world in which I live professionally. We're dealing a lot with politics, often partisan politics. And so things are getting increasingly polarized. People are just shouting at each other. People are saying things like, I don't even want to talk to someone who disagrees with me, right? Which is just crazy. It's like, well, then we're never gonna move forward. We're never gonna see any progress if we can't even sit down with one another. And so I started thinking, I think if we were more intentional about what we're doing on this music side, swapping these songs, I actually think that we could help this civil discourse side. And because one of the things we found every month when we would get together, I'd get together with my buddies, we'd have a category like, if you could play another instrument, what would it sound like? What would you want it to sound like? Right? And I remember I picked, I don't play the piano. I'd love to be able to play the piano.
Okay.
And if I could, I would play like the Buena Vista Social Club.
Oh,
because there's just some songs out of, that group, Buena Vista Social Club, that I just think are phenomenal. And if I could only learn to play one way, I would be satisfied, I think. And I would just go, okay, this would be great. Well, when one of my friends shared his songs, and we talked about it, it wasn't so much that I was learning about his musicianship or the artist and the song itself. He was sharing, and it was because his dad had played that instrument. So next thing you know, we're learning about the relationship that he had with his father,
Mm.
right? And so we were getting much deeper than just listening to some track. And so I started to work on the Come Together Music Project. So that was kind of the origin story of what has now become an organization.
Yeah, and incredible. And I've seen some of your episodes, and I had a feeling we, would have a kinship because your ability to elicit conversation with your guests is just,
Oh, thank you.
without peer. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that coming from you. And
Oh, thank you.
in some ways, though, and I say this, or I try to
Mm.
at every session that we do, I feel really lucky that, in some ways, like I get to look like I came up with this really smart thing, but the music is doing most of the work. you know, it's not like I wrote any of the
Wow.
songs. I couldn't, but
Yeah.
for reasons we can get into, I think that when you use music, what we say is we use music as a way to deepen existing relationships, create
Hmm.
new ones, and build
Hmm.
bridges. And
Yes.
that happens every time I sit down and interview guests. We are deepening a relationship. Sometimes it's two people who do know one another and are colleagues, but they know each other better after we go through one of these exercises. Sometimes it's two people who are perfect strangers,
Mm.
and it's amazing to see where they find common ground. And
Yeah.
you use music as kind of the entry point.
One of the things, I mean, I love so much about this, but one in particular is that I do feel like in the last couple of years, as the effects of the pandemic have lessened and we're kind of in a new phase, that people are starting to seek out again ways to connect, sometimes in person and physically, but sometimes even online. That was kind of on the wane for quite a
Yeah.
while. You have things like, have you ever heard of silent discos?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've done those, and they're really fun, and all of that. But at the same time, I grew up where if someone was playing music, you listened to that music. And even if it wasn't your music, you found something about it that you might enjoy, or at least try to understand why that other person enjoyed it because you were listening to the same thing at the same time.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot that you're touching on there. There's something special that happens when we stay in one another's like proximity for a matter of time, right? Because now we are in this mode of like having the attention span of like a goldfish.
Mm.
And so we move from thing to thing. I do it myself. So I'm not accusing others
Yeah. Me
of
too.
things that I don't do
Yeah.
myself, but I move from thing to thing, bouncing, bouncing, bouncing all the time.
Right.
There is something really nice about just sitting with an idea for a little while, letting it kind of marinate and maybe take root. And likewise, sitting in the company of another person, um, I I think it's much harder to demonize people when you sit in company with them, right? Um, I think that's just factual.
Yes.
Last night, in fact, my wife and I went to a concert at the Grand Ole Opry. If you can believe
Oh.
it, it was the first time that James Taylor has ever played at the Grand Ole Opry.
Wow.
It's phenomenal,
Oh.
phenomenal show. The way that a show works at the Grand Ole Opry is that there are a number of musicians. I mean, I think there were 7 different acts over the night because
Okay.
it's still a live radio show, and so they come on. They'll do 3, 4 songs.
Yep.
The host will kind of take a commercial break. The folks are running around changing things on set. It's pretty amazing to see how fast it goes. And there was definitely some music that was not my favorite.
Sure.
But I'm sure that's also the case, by the way, for however many thousands of people were in that venue.
Absolutely. Yep.
There's nobody in there who was just like, oh, I think all of this is awesome. No way. I do not believe that's true. But everybody sat there. Everybody was respectful. Everybody's clapping along. You see smiles on faces, right? These are perfect strangers. There's times when the artist and you're a musician, you know this, but there's times when there's crowd engagement where they're saying, hey, everybody sing together. if you walked outside your house and you just started singing and you tried to get people to sing in unison with you, that would be like a crazy thing. People would call the authorities on you, right? Like there's a
Yes.
man shouting on the streets here in Queens. Um, Except we go to a concert and we expect it. We expect that at some point it's going to be okay if I just want to stand up, start clapping, whatever, and sing at the top of my lungs. Music is a shared experience, and I think it's best actually when shared with other people.
I agree. I agree so much. I think it brings up two things, which, by the way, everybody, just so you know, the bonus M extra for this week at patreon.com/music is not a genre is Shaka's going to run me through what he does. Ask me about a couple of significant songs, which will spark some conversation and all of that. So please go check it out. I'm very excited to be doing that. But one thing is, you mentioned that the shared experience. The first thing that comes to mind is that one of the reasons I started creating music is because my dad is a musician and I grew up watching him play. And I had to answer the question for something. I forget what it was. Why do I create music? And I have had 1,000 different answers over my lifetime. And I really wanted to get to the heart of it. And what it ended up being that I still think is true is that my dad was singing songs that other people were loving, and finding that connection with him and with the music itself. And I said to myself, if I could create songs that create that type of connection with other people, and essentially the way I put it was I wanted to be the song that my dad was singing. And
Yeah, I like
that
that. It's
has
beautiful.
motivated pretty much my entire creation career.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One of the things that I think music helps with is to express some of the sentiments, the emotions that would be hard for us to write down, kind of as an original product,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, um, for instance, if you said to me, "Hey, Shaka, write a song about your father," I would go, "Ooh, that's really challenging." I would probably just balk. I would probably just go like, "Forget it. I'm not in. I'm out. I
Yep.
can't do that. It's too daunting. I don't write music about anything. I'm not going to write a music about that."
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you said, "Hey, Shaka, what's a song that reminds you of your father?"
Yeah.
Now that I can do,
Yeah.
right? It still might take me a minute. It might take me a week of having to think about it. But music is really sticky. There's this great quote I love. It says that every memory has a soundtrack all its own,
No,
and
yeah, I love that.
and I think it rings true for me. Right? You can think about moments and immediately a song will come to mind, or vice versa. You hear a song sometimes when you're just walking through the grocery store. It's amazing to me now the music that has become grocery store music is the music of our youth. I'm
So true.
right. You're walking through, and I'm like, all of a sudden you go, "Am I listening to Ice Cube's Today's a Good Day?" You're like, in
Right.
Whole Foods, in a Whole Foods,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like what's happening?
Yep. Yep.
But it immediately takes me back, right? It takes me back to a place. It takes me back even to just movies and friends, that I was with at the time. But music does that. All to say, I think that music can help us to access some vulnerability that would be hard to just write down on our own. And so I think that's one of the reasons that I believe the project works, is because when I sit down with guests and I say, "Hey, what's a song that reminds you of a relationship that you lost?"
Oh, yeah.
Well, people start thinking about the song, and so they pick the song, and we listen to it, or a clip of it, and then they start talking about it. Well, that's all of a sudden they find that they are sharing things that might be really personal and intimate. I heard
Yes.
a judge. We did this in a court of appeals judge, high ranking judge. I asked, "What's a song that you associate with a difficult season in life. And
Mm,
he picked a Nine Inch Nail song,
wow.
and this is a judge, and a appellate court judge
Wow.
picked a Nine Inch Nail song, and the reason was because it's the song that he listened to just on repeat after he had had a relationship, a romantic relationship ended in a way that was really just heartbreaking. And he told us about that. I don't know how
Wow.
we ever would have had that conversation normally.
Mm-mm.
I don't think we
Mm-mm.
would have. But in the process, we really humanized. And so even if you don't agree with the outcome, this guy's judicial decisions, you know that he is a person who has had feelings that are similar to those that I think are pretty universal.
That's incredible. That's yeah. I could absorb something like that every day. Like that's just it's so enriching and yeah. I feel like a wave of warmth just hearing that story. You know, I do a lot of. I've been doing this show since 2019, and I come up with words that are little things like when I say chronolography, it means I've listened to an entire catalog of an artist or something like that.
Yeah.
A heart artist is somebody that you will never ever not listen to, and that you want to hear everything they've ever done, and not everybody you like is a hard artist. And then there's one called I call the share tingles, which is you can love a song and you can have heard that song 1,000 times and still like it, but there's a part of you that's like, yeah, but I've heard that. When you play that for somebody else, it's like you're hearing it for the first time again.
Hmm.
And when they
Oh,
start
interesting.
responding the way you do, you feel that tingle in the air because you want them to experience what you experienced when you first heard that song.
Wow, that's really good. I think I have not thought about that dynamic of how it feels to share music as well. But I
Yeah.
think you're right. I think there's probably a link there with why music is a part of every major faith tradition, right? If you
Ooh, yes.
if you think
Yes.
about if you think about music, how music is used, well, music is a part of every faith tradition. And so when we're worshiping together, many times we are singing, and the church that we attend, one of the ways that our pastor has talked about music is that it's actually in that context not necessarily meant to be performative. He says this is us reminding one another of what we know is true. I was like,
Mm.
that's a great way to think about music in that
Oh,
context,
it
right? But I
really
think
is.
it aligns with what you're talking about, the share tingles idea, because if this is something that is so important to you that you would sing about it, then wouldn't you feel even more enlivened when somebody else shares in that and they appreciate it too?
Yeah, that's it. And that's really if in all the struggle, and I'm talking more as a creator now than anything else, but in all the struggle, career and all of that stuff, I think that's what keeps me coming back. I think it's the one thing you said, which is a couple weeks ago I had a guest on who's a songwriter, and we talked about how you can express things in song that you can't in other ways
Yep.
because you're pulling from a place that's almost somehow without words that then become words. And those are not words that if somebody asked you that question, like you said, write a song about your father, you couldn't have done it. But then it comes out in song. And so that ability to express things in that way that you can't access, that are almost sometimes prescient. They're telling like 6 months later, you're like, oh wow, I was just singing about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then to share that
Mm-hmm.
with an audience in one way or another, it really feels it. I will say this: I haven't been religious for a very long time, except for the fact that the most spiritual experiences I have had in the last several decades are because of music.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Yeah. But I think, yeah, for all the reasons that we're discussing, it's a pretty unique thing in that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it again, I would say, thinking in kind of religious terms again, I would say that that music is a common grace, meaning that it's just
Mm.
this. I do think it's um, a grace that is accessible commonly. Like it's something that I think we've kind of been given, and um, I don't know exactly what it was, but I think about the song Hallelujah, right? I don't know exactly what the secret
Mm.
chord was that David played. Um,
Yeah.
but the fact that we have chords and that it works, it does not feel accidental.
Yeah. Harmonics and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And but
That's
it's
physics too.
accessible for
Yeah.
everybody. And that's what I think is really special about it. And,
Yes.
yeah, I've been really pleased with how things are going, and I've just seen the power of it work.
I love that. And I mean, is there anything else you want to say about the Come Together music projects, or anything at all that you want to kind of leave the audience with?
Yeah, well, I mean, thanks for letting me talk about it. And I mean, from the first time that we spoke, it definitely just resonated. How you and I think about music as this tool, and you can see it. You can maybe even appreciate it better because you're someone who listens but is also an artist, and so I appreciate that it does resonate with you.
Hmm.
You know, for folks who are listening, I would love for them to check out what we're doing. We are a pretty new organization, so this, as you can hear, started up as just sort of a passion project, and we said, you know, I think that this has got some potential. It's not a job for me. It really is just a passion pursuit. Nevertheless, we incorporated it as a 501c3 nonprofit organization.
Nice. Wow.
I would love for folks to check it out. I mean, the website is cometogetherpodcast.com.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to cometogetherpodcast.com, you'll see all the other links. So you can check out video episodes on YouTube. You can hear audio on iTunes or Spotify. There's an Instagram page. And so I would be honored if people would, do all the things, like and subscribe.
Yep.
Because I do think that this can be a model of how we reform and regrow some of the community connections that I think have eroded over the past few years. So again, I don't think that you're going to sit through a come together session and necessarily just want to embrace all the ideas of someone who is opposite you. But I do think that when we listen to music together, when we hear one another tell stories about this, I do think we are more willing now to humanize someone with whom we disagree. And that's a start. It's not the whole ball of wax just yet, but it's a pretty good start. And in the meantime, it's always really fun. So we always have a really good time. There are always songs that people pick that you never would have guessed. I mean, I mentioned that Judge picked a Nine Inch Nails song.
Yeah.
I had, there are always surprises. That same Judge, when we asked him, what's a song that takes you back to your time in law school? He picked Yeah by Lil Jon, Usher, and Ludacris. And, again, never would have expected that. I'm pretty sure that no one who's ever stood before him in court ever would have guessed that this man would have picked that music. So again, it's always surprising, but in a really positive and healthy way. So I'd love for folks to check out what we're doing on, your platform of choice.
Oh, please do. Everybody, cometogetherpodcast.com. If you're watching, you have seen the link. It's down there right now. The link will be in the text, whether you are watching or listening. But again, cometogetherpodcast.com. I implore you to check it out because you will love it. And I think one final thought about that is that it's important to understand what problems we have that we are looking to resolve and to find ways to meet them head on. But that can often be a blunt instrument that can be abrasive to others in a way that is off-putting, which you have to do it anyway. I don't think that should stop you. But when you can come at it from a side angle, like finding ways to share experiences through music, I really do believe that there's a part of a person's brain that opens up and says, well, if that's the case and I'm finding this connection, then maybe I'll listen to what they have to say about this other thing too. And we can find a middle ground,
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. That's really well put. Really well put.
Thank you. And everybody, please, I'm super excited because right after we wrap here, I get to do the song thing with Shaka, the bonus MxTRA, patreon.com/music is not a genre. We just get to talk about music some more, which is exciting for me. But again, cometogetherpodcast.com. Shaka, thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks so much.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and it's been a pleasure talking with all of you out there too. As always, my objectives here are music, conversation, and connection. Thank you for hanging with me, and I will talk to you next week.